Why credit utilization is so important. It makes up 30% of your score. If you get this wrong, your score is never going to be where you want it to be. And if you can master this, then this is when you start being able to spend correctly with different cards and be able to always have a strong credit score. A lot of people complain because their credit score changes every single month and they don't know why. Well, this is what 90% of people don't understand. If you can understand this, then you're going to have good credit at all times. What's up, guys? So in this video, I'm going to talk to you guys about what a closing statement date is and why it's so important. So first off, the closing statement date, that's when the credit card company tells the credit bureaus what your balance was for the end of the month. The reason that's important is because this affects credit utilization. So credit utilization, I'm going to put it here, makes up 30% of your credit score. So it has a really big impact. All this means is how much credit are you using from available credit line. So to give you guys an example, let's say you had a $1,000 credit card, and let's say you spent $500 from that $1,000 credit. So you spent $500. That means the remaining credit available is $500. This is 50% utilization. So that means after spending $500 for your $1,000 credit card, you're utilizing 50% of the card. Now, the reason the statement closing date is very important to know is because you want to make sure that when the statement closing date comes, you have paid down your card to anywhere from a 0 to 10% balance. So what is 0% of this? That means card is paid in full. If it's a 10% balance, 10% of 1,000 is $100. So what this means is, let's say we spent $500, we're at 50% utilization. That's not good. We want to be either paid in full, which is 0%, or at 10% or under. That means if we spent $500, we want to pay at least $400 towards that balance. What that means is now we're going to spend $400, and now we only owe $100 on the credit card. And remember, 10% of $1,000 is only $100, which is the number we got here. So that's where you want to be. And the reason you want to be here is because, again, banks like people that don't spend all of the money available to them. This is why when we talk about credit utilization up here, we want to make sure that we're always leaving either a 0 to 10% balance of available limits. Now, a lot of times you'll hear people say it's okay to leave 30% or less. The answer is, if you want somewhat of a boost in your credit score, then you actually want to hold a little bit of a balance. That means 1 to 10%. But for the people that have incurred 30% their entire life, that is the maximum balance that you ever want to hold at a time. Because if you hold higher than a 30% balance when your utilization reports, that is going to negatively impact your score. So to play it safe and to just do yourself a favor, either have your cards paid off all the time, or make sure the highest utilization you go up to is just 10% of your balance. And remember, you always want to pay attention to what your credit limit is, because the percentage depends on your credit limit. Again, if you have a $1,000 card, 10% of that is $100. If you have a $10,000 card, 10% is $1,000. So always pay attention to what your credit limit is, because based off your credit limit, these are how the percentages work. Now, why is this important? Credit utilization is 30% of your score. So obviously, if you don't get this right, it's going to create a big impact to your credit score. Now, the reason why the statement closing date matters is because this date is the date your credit card company will report it to the credit bureaus. Once statement closes, this utilization gets sent to credit bureaus. Once it gets sent to the credit bureaus, they calculate your score and update report. So that's important, because if we want to go for funding, we want to make sure that we show banks that we can handle the credit lines that we already have. If you were 30% or higher, you're already showing the bank that you can't handle your credit cards that well. So that is why I always recommend to be 0 to 10% of any credit card limit, because now if we go for funding, banks see we don't really need money and that we can manage what we already have. So if I ask the banks for money and I'm showing a low utilization on my cards, they are more likely to approve me. If I came to the bank and I had a credit card that was at 50% maxed out, they are going to most likely deny me. So the reason why the statement matters is because whatever balance you leave when that day comes, that is all going to get reported to the credit bureaus. So we want to make sure when the statement closes, we left a small balance, which is 0 to 10% of the credit line. That way, when the bank sees us, they are more likely to approve us because we look like we can responsibly manage our cards. So that is a big reason why we want to pay attention to credit utilization. Now, how do we find out the date? I'm talking a lot about the statement closing date, but where is that? How do you find it? Well, let me show you guys. The easiest way that I can tell you guys is by paying attention to the minimum payment due date. Most credit card companies will have the due date be anywhere 3 to 5 business days before statement closes. So let's say your due date is the 10th of every month. So if the 10th is due date every month, then we can expect statement closing date to be, like I mentioned, 3 to 5 days after, so anywhere from the 13th to the 15th. And the reason they do that is because they want to give you enough time so that if you submit a payment, the money has time to clear. That way it's applied to the statement balance. So that's one way to look at it. And this is usually going to apply for almost 99% of credit cards out there. However, the best way to always know when your statement closing date is by actually checking your statement. So if you go to your credit card company, they will be sending you a statement every single month. Every month you get a statement. If you log into the state, if you check the statement, it will tell you the billing cycle, which is going to be, it's usually going to give you the start date and end date, otherwise known as statement opening date and statement closing date. So once we check our statement, it's going to literally tell us when the statement opens and when the statement closes. So what does this mean? What this means is, again, if you have any balances, you want to make sure when this date comes, you have paid down credit card to 0 to 10% of balance. Does that make sense? I hope so. And let me come here because we're going towards the bottom. So now that we know statement opening and closing dates are listed inside of statement, pay attention to them. These are the dates we need to be aware of. That way we know when to start spending and when to make sure we stop spending. What do I mean by that? Let's go back to that example. You have $1,000 credit card, and let's say you spend $500. You have $500 left. Let's say statement closes on the 10th. Statement closes on 10th. This means when the 10th comes, we want to only show 0 to 10% of the credit card, which means we're going to go with the 10%. We want to leave $100 balance. That means we need to pay $400 before date close date. Now, it's important that now remember what I told you guys? Payment usually takes 3 to 5 days to clear. That's why your due date is usually 3 to 5 days before it. So what that means is that, yes, we have to make a $400 payment, but we have to make that payment at the right time. So if our statement closes on the 10th, in order for us to be safe, we need to make a payment by the 6th of $400. This ensures that we have 3 to 5 days for that payment to go through, so that when the 10th comes, that $400 payment reflects and we only leave a $100 balance. Now, that means we have $900 available, $1K, which is our credit card limit, which means we only have 10% utilization. So this is why it's important to understand utilization. This is why it's important to understand the dates. This is how you can find them. And this is also why it's important to know when to pay them, because they know statement closing date is on the 10th. So they say, I'll pay on the 9th. Well, that's the issue, because if you pay on the 9th, your credit card company won't actually receive the money from your bank account until 3 to 5 days later, which now means around the 13th or 14th is when they actually receive the money and balance reflects the new amount. So if you would have paid on the 9th because you think your statement closes on the 10th and you say, hey, I made a payment, so my balance is going to be lower, that's incorrect. Your new balance isn't going to be reflecting until the 13th or the 14th. So if we use that same $500 example and you pay $400 on the 9th, when the 10th comes, you will still have the $500 balance because not enough time passed. So 1 day is not enough time for the bank to get your money and apply it to the balance. The thing is that, and where it can get confusing, is that some credit cards, when you pay them instantly, you actually are able to spend that limit again and it increases right in front of you, but the balance doesn't actually reflect that. So to play it safe, general rule of thumb is always make sure that you pay down the cards at least 5 days before the statement is closing. You can find your statement inside of your credit card bills, inside of your credit card statements, and usually these dates are always the same. Now, if you're towards the end of the month or in the beginning of the month, it might change by a day or two because some months have less days than others. Some months close on the 28th, some on the 30th, some on the 31st. So if you're towards the end, that is something where it may fluctuate, but it's always going to be a day or two apart or behind. But for the most part, your statement closing dates and your statement opening dates are always going to be the same. So if I know my statement closes on the 10th of January, then on the 10th of February, 10th of March, 10th of April, 10th of June, everything is usually going to stay the same. So once you figure out what your statements are, write them down so you're aware. And if you don't like the dates that you have, you can literally call the credit card company and see if they can allow you to switch. And by switching when your payment is due, your statement closing date follows. Remember, 3 to 5 days after. So that's information on why credit utilization is so important. It makes up 30% of your score. If you get this wrong, your score is never going to be where you want it to be. And if you can master this, then this is when you start being able to spend correctly with different cards and be able to always have a strong credit score. A lot of people complain because their credit score changes every single month and they don't know why. Well, this is what 90% of people don't understand. If you can understand this, then you're going to have good credit at all times. So make sure you understand credit utilization and make sure this is on point for when you are getting ready for funding. Because if you can show the bank that you don't spend a lot of the money that you already have, they're going to be wanting to give you more. When you are over leveraged or you have high balances or your cards are maxed out, you're telling the bank that you can't handle the money you already have. So they are not going to want to lend to you because now, if you can't handle what somebody else gave you, how are you going to be able to handle what this person gives you? And on top of that, it's just a bigger risk to the bank because not only do you have this person to pay back, now this new company is giving you money and it's just more people to pay back. The more people you owe, the less likely you are to pay back and the more likely you are to default. So this is how the banks think. So make sure you know what they're thinking in order to secure the best chance of approvals. If you want to learn more about credit and funding, make sure to follow this page where I'll be teaching you guys everything I know. Talk to you guys later.